Special Field Order Number 15 reserved roughly 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land along the coasts of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida for black settlement. The order stated that each black family would receive up to 40 acres of tillable land, and that the Army would loan mules left over from the war effort to help with farming.
Y'all know what it is. Your boy Sunshine. We back. Welcome to Uncle Sam's Truth. Y'all know what it is, man. I hope y'all enjoyed the last video. Yeah, what we talking about is why black people didn't get their 40 acres in the mule. They say this is why. So let's check this video out, man. Y'all know what it is. Make sure y'all like, share, and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get into this video. Uncle Sam's Truth.
Union General William Tecumseh Sherman issued Special Field Order Number 15 in January 1865. A rumor fluttered through the war-ravaged South like a sparrow in spring. Free black families would finally have land of their own, 40 acres, and maybe a mule to work it. To the 4 million African Americans who had lived and labored under the inhuman yoke of slavery, this promise sounded not merely like a blessing, but like a restoration of humanity itself. Land was freedom, autonomy, dignity. It meant survival in a nation that had built its wealth upon their backs. For a fleeting moment in history, it seemed the newly freed people might actually seize a future that America had long denied them. Yet what followed was not triumph but betrayal, not fulfillment but abandonment. The dream of 40 acres and a mule quickly dissolved into a grim testament to America's reluctance to rectify the brutalities of its past. To understand the betrayal of this promise, one must first step into the fiery cauldron of the Civil War's final days. The Union Army was sweeping through the South, leaving destroyed Confederate infrastructure in its wake. Sherman's infamous march to the sea had devastated Georgia, and by early 1865, the general found himself confronted with an urgent dilemma: what to do with the thousands of newly freed black refugees trailing his army. These men, women, and children had risked everything to flee their enslavers, yet they had nowhere to go, no means to support themselves, and were profoundly vulnerable to violence, disease, and starvation. In response, Sherman convened a meeting on January 12, 1865, in Savannah, Georgia, with 20 black ministers and leaders, among them Garrison Frazier, a former Baptist minister who had purchased his own freedom after decades of bondage. The assembled leaders spoke with extraordinary...
He purchased his own freedom. That's crazy if you think about it. Went to war and fought and helped free their owners. Still were enslaved without nothing.
...clarity about the needs of their people. Frazier, speaking for the group, articulated that freedom was placing us where we could reap the fruit of our own labor, and that owning land was essential to securing that freedom. Sherman listened, and remarkably, he acted. Special Field Order Number 15 reserved roughly 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land along the coasts of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida for black settlement. The order...
400,000 acres? Where the hell is my 40? In South Carolina? And I'm in South Carolina right now.
Stated that each black family would receive up to 40 acres of tillable land, and that the Army would loan mules left over from the war effort to help with farming. It was a bold move, one that recognized that true emancipation required not just the absence of chains, but the presence of opportunity. For a few shining months, the promise of 40 acres and a mule became a living reality. Black families settled on the land, built homes, planted crops, and founded communities governed by their own institutions. These settlements were not experiments in dependency, as many white contemporaries sneeringly suggested, but experiments in autonomy and resilience. Freed people demonstrated profound capability when given even the barest chance to control their destinies. But this progress would soon be violently reversed. Abraham Lincoln's assassination in April 18...
Hold up. We're going to get to that Abraham Lincoln and him being assassinated. The 40 acres and a mule came from purchasing 400,000 acres of land. And also, the mules were issued by the army because they were left over. And everything seems to be going good until Abraham Lincoln is assassinated.
65 altered the trajectory of Reconstruction dramatically. His successor, Andrew Johnson, a Southern Democrat with deep-seated racist convictions, swiftly moved to restore the old order. Johnson issued a series of proclamations pardoning former Confederates and returning confiscated lands to them, often at the expense of the newly freed black settlers. Johnson believed that the federal government had no business redistributing property, and that black Americans should remain a laboring underclass, subordinate to white landowners. Freedmen were evicted by force, their communities dismantled almost overnight. Armed white militias and former Confederate soldiers, many of whom would later form the Ku Klux Klan, terrorized black settlers, often with the tacit approval or outright support of federal troops. Land titles granted under Sherman's order were ignored or annulled. The Freedmen's Bureau, established to assist freed slaves, lacked both the political will and resources to resist Johnson's policies effectively. Officials often told displaced black families to sign exploitative labor contracts with their former enslavers, perpetuating a cycle of economic servitude under the euphemism of sharecropping. Thus, the phrase 40 acres and a mule came to embody not a fulfilled promise but a profound betrayal. Black Americans were not merely denied reparations, they were actively re-enslaved economically and politically under new guises. The Reconstruction period, rather than realizing the ideals of freedom and equality, birthed the Jim Crow system, a legally codified racial caste system that endured well into the 20th century. The betrayal of 40 acres and a mule also set the stage for the enormous...
They gave us 40 acres and a mule and took it away from us. As soon as Lincoln died, Johnson, who didn't like the federal laws that were put in place, restored it back to the old ways, and we were re-enslaved. This is why we not getting our 40 acres and a mule, because of Johnson. We had it, they took it away.
This racial wealth gap that persists in America today. Ownership of land and property is a principal means of accumulating and passing down wealth. By denying formerly enslaved people the opportunity to own land at the most critical moment, the nation ensured that generations of African Americans would begin their lives at a staggering disadvantage. White families, by contrast, benefited from land grants under initiatives like the Homestead Act of 1862, further exacerbating inequalities. The mythos around 40 acres and a mule has endured because it represents more than a historical footnote. It is a symbol of promises unkept.
The Homestead Act in 1862. Okay, here's the Homestead Act. The 1862 Homestead Act, signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln, enabled adult citizens or those intended to become citizens, we were intended to become citizens, to claim 160 acres of public land in the western United States, provided they live on it, improve it, and pay the small fee.
Justice deferred. It reminds us that freedom is not merely the end of change, but the beginning of empowerment. Without material resources, land, wealth, education, freedom remains an empty shell, a legal fiction rather than a living reality. Today, the echoes of this broken promise still reverberate through debates about reparations, economic justice, and racial equity. Some argue that genuine reparations must not only acknowledge the sins of slavery, but also the profound systemic injustices of Reconstruction's collapse. The denial of 40 acres and a mule was not a singular failure, but the first betrayal in a long American tradition of offering freedom rhetorically while undermining it materially. When we revisit the story of 40 acres and a mule, we are not merely delving into a forgotten chapter of American history. We are uncovering the root system of racial injustice that continues to shape the present. It is a history that demands to be remembered, reckoned with, and someday redressed.
Yes, that right there alone set us back. You heard what they said, and it kind of touches me. fucked me up. So guys, there's no 40 acres in the mule, and this is why. This is Uncle Sam's truth. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Make sure y'all like, share, and subscribe. And if y'all want me to react to a video, leave it down in the comments and I'll check it out. Y'all know what it is. And I'm out.